Talking about hard cider. So the apples that you're going to taste, they'll probably make really good sweet cider apples. There's plenty of sugar in them. There's probably ingredients in them that are all better for fermentation. We'll talk to those as we go. But you're going to get to taste 8 apples today. And the apples, I would say, are the second star of the show, because it is going to be a very practical session. You're all going to get to taste them. And I'm going to ask questions, because we all have different senses in terms of how we smell and how we taste. And some of you are going to detect sort of tastes that are different from others. So I'll be asking lots of questions as we go. I said the second stars are the apples. The first stars are the folks here on my left, because they are the cutters. And it is their job to make sure that when you receive a piece of apple, it doesn't have a fingernail or a thumb associated with it. And so, not yet. Yeah, sometimes it's pretty close and pretty close to the bone, literally in some cases. But we haven't had a digit being removed yet. But thanks cutters for all the work you're going to do over the next few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to first talk about what cider apples are and how they're classified while the cutters get up to speed. So probably the earliest and the simplest classification system for cider apples was developed at a place called Long Ashton, which is just south of Bristol in England. And that Long Ashton model broke cider apples into 4 categories: sweets, sharps, bitter sweets, and bitter sharps. So we're going to talk to each of the apples with those terms as we go through this. The wonderful thing about cider apples, though, and a trait they share with ourselves as human beings, is they hate being put into boxes. So, yeah, I will say that this is a bitter sharp apple. And it may not be a bitter sharp. The consensus in this tent is that it may not be a bitter sharp, because apples, when you're tasting cider apples in particular, you're tasting the season. You're tasting the water, the sun, the terroir of the region where you grow the apples. And a sharp apple may be a sweet apple, and I'll describe what that means in a minute. Or a bittersweet apple may be a sharp apple. Depends on when you picked, the conditions for the season. You know, apples like fooling us and keeping us on our toes. And that's what they're going to do today. Okay, so let's talk about the first apple. So we're going to do a palate cleanser. So the first category I talked to was sweets. Now, all apples are sweet. They basically convert as they ripen. They convert the starches into sugars. There's all sugar in apples. That's why they are important for fermentation, because that's what the yeast like in converting sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So essentially a sweet apple isn't necessarily something that has sugar in. They all have sugar, but it does not have other qualities. It does not have acid. So malic acid is the primary acid in apples. It doesn't have acid in any great quantities. I'll talk about the importance of acid when we get to the more acidic apples. And it doesn't have something called tannins. Now, tannins are the qualities in some apples that add a similar quality to what you sense in red wine. So in red wine, in the skin of red grapes, you've got tannin, and those tannins will give you a sort of sensation of a drying sensation after you drink it at the back of your throat. So those are tannins. Some tannins have that astringency, that drying sensation. And there's lots of tannin in tea, so you probably recognise what tannins are when you drink black or green tea. Some tannins are bitter, so they have a bitter sensation. But they're very, very rare in apples. It's the holy grail. Some cider makers talk to bitter apples as the holy grail. So let's talk about this apple. So this apple is a wild apple. So the first fallacy to disprove is that you can't make cider with any apple. You can. This apple was found by Sean Taylor. Sean, I think it's over at the Maine Heritage Orchard tent, and is a great apple forager. So he finds apples with just incredible aromatics. So we'll get to taste one of those today. And this one is called Yarmouth Jersey. So Sean, as the forager, got to name it, which is pretty cool. So who hasn't had the Yarmouth jersey yet? Can you put up your hands so we can make sure? A few folks at the front, a few folks on the side. So our servers will be bringing them around. So some folks on the front here, and then the folks at the sides have the Yarmouth jersey. Okay, so I haven't tasted it yet. I'll taste a little bit when it comes around. I did have a little taste early today. I've only been introduced to this apple. Just a lot of fun. Yeah.
Was Curly Joe to start, and now it's Yarmouth Jersey?
No, it was always Yarmouth Jersey. So it's a seedling apple. It's an apple that's just been found growing wild, a wild seedling, and it was named by presumably by Sean. Hopefully you can confirm that.
Can you show us the apple?
Can I show you?
We cannot.
The apple.
Even down to the core. It's a little runty,
sort of reddish, with a red lush yet on a yellow background. But nice apple. So this is a sweet. So, you know, why don't folks just shout out, and I'll start on this side of the room. This is usually the rowdiest side of the room, so we have to start with them or they get really, really irate. So we'll start with this side of the room. What's the one word you'd use to describe the apple that you just tasted?
sweet.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Okay, there's probably some confirmation bias. I didn't say this would be a sweet apple. What other words? I missed the other words. Mealy. Okay, so the texture's a little rough, right? It's not the sort of taste you would get in a store-bought apple. Soft. Okay. Yes.
The taste was sort of homogenous. There wasn't a lot of boring.
Okay, it was mostly the sugars that came up. It wasn't aromatic. We weren't detecting other things. Okay, so these guys have really got very rough taste buds. Clearly. They just had an early lunch. They can't taste anything other than it's sweet or mealy. Okay, now the experts, the connoisseurs on the left side of the room. Yes. Pear. Interesting. Maybe part of the texture as well. That sort of mealiness is more common in pears. But really good observation. Yes. Banana. Very nice. Or banana. Very nice. Yes. Okay. So, you know, a little smoother, sort of creamier texture and taste. Very interesting. Any other tastes on this side of the room?
Boring.
So you sure you just have a seat on this side, on the right side of the room? Okay, maybe not. Okay, so we're ready for the second one. So as we're handing out the second one, I'm going to talk about that categorization again. So, like I said, sweet just has sugar. And sweet apples, unless there's really intense aromatics, are often used to add bulk to a cider because they've got lots of sugar in them, and you know the sugar is going to be converted into alcohol. So you know, sweets are generally used when you've got space in your fermenter and you're trying to use all of that fermentation space. Okay, so the next apple, we're staying in the United States. And we're taking a trip down to New Jersey to talk about the Harrison apple. So this is a pre-prohibition apple in the States. Not many, well, some of you will know that cider was indeed the drink of colonial America, and certainly very popular in terms of any of the sort of rural parts of the United States where, you know, as folks moved west, they took some apple seeds with them and some apple trees. So let's put our hands up again, and who has not tasted the Harrison yet? Alright, so a couple of folks at the back. Okay, and it looks like they're sorted, so everyone's tasted the Harrison at this point. So the next question is primarily to talk about contrasts. So how is this different from the first apple? So the right side of the room, the rowdy side of the room. So everyone's going to shout out at once in unison here on the rowdy side. So reflections on the Harrison. Sour.
Balanced.
Sorry? Tart?
Balanced.
Balanced. Lemony. Okay. So in very high concentrations malic acid, including in cider when you're making it, it can have very lemony notes. So when there's a lot of malic acid there. So this is a shot. So sharp is, in my mind, and there are many sort of cider making traditions around the world that will use large amounts of sharp apples, in some cases exclusively sharp apples, is one of the most important parts of the fermentation process. The acid essentially plays the janitorial role in the fermentation, keeps things clean. So generally, if you can feel that sort of tart, that sour sensation, when you can feel your mouth starting to produce acids, starting to produce saliva to protect the calcium in your teeth from acid, then you know you've got probably enough acid in there for a nice clean fermentation. So it also adds something called bite or depth to a cider. You get more than just as with the sweet apples, you got that sweet sensation, and then there was very little else. But the cider can give you a nice long finish to a sip when it has a good component of sharp apples in it. Okay, so that's the rowdy side of the room. They're working up. They're waiting for some fermentation in the stomach, and then they're going to go really rowdy. But the connoisseurs, the left side of the room, any other tastes other than sour and sharp? Yes.
Stole my word, acid.
Acid. Okay, so acid! Exclamation mark. Yeah, that's a good. Bright. Very nice. Yeah, I love that word. Bright. Yes,
Tart.
It's very bright. Sorry?
Tart.
Tart. Yes, very, very, very tart. So really, really important for apples. And as I mentioned, there was cider traditions that use almost exclusively sharp apples. Spanish tradition uses a lot of sharp apples in particular. Okay, so we're ready now for we're going to cross the ocean. We're going to head over the Atlantic. We're going to go to that country of eternal rain and misery. We're going to get to England. And we're going to look at the Somerset Red Streak. Now, Todd, who's a professor at the College of Atlantic, informs me the Somerset Red Streak was one of the first English cider apples brought over to the United States. So it has a long history of actually being grown in the United States and also being grown here in Maine. And the Somerset Red Streak came from John Bunker's Super Chili Farms over in Palermo, and is a very well known and well cultivated English cider apple. So we're going to wait for a little bit, and then we're going to talk about another quality. So we talked about those 4 categorizations. So we've gone through sweet, we've done a little bit of sharp. Now we're going to go into something called bittersweet. Now, the idea of a bittersweet apple is that, they all have sugar, but it's low in acid, but it has tannins in it. So, now the interesting thing is, can you taste the tannins? Because in most cider apples, sugar and certainly the acid can actually hide some of those tannins. It's when the sugar is stripped out in the fermentation process that astringency comes to the fore. So it'll be interesting, those of you who can taste it, comparing it to the first 2 apples and maybe sense a different quality, and those who don't, who may think it just tastes like the sweet apple that we started off with. So again, we're going to do a show of hands who's not had a Somerset Red Streak. A couple of folks at the back and here on the left. So we'll pass those around. Oh, I think the folks at the back are good. There's not a lot of interest in the Somerset Red Streak by the looks of things. Lots of it left on the plate. I'll devour that later. Okay, so rowdy sides.
It's my gimmick, I guess.
So rowdy side. Thoughts on the Somerset Red Streak? Dry. Okay. Now, it can be true that a lot of cider apples can be dry without having astringency. So one of the things, if you think about when cider was made, one of the things that is really helpful to someone who's pressing cider. So you essentially mill cider apples and then you press them, typically. And so you thought that, oh, I've got to get the juiciest apple, right? I've got to get as much juice out of this apple as I want. When you've crushed that apple and it has the texture of applesauce, and it's December, and you're standing in a freezing barn trying to press this stuff, and it's spraying everywhere, and you're covered with apple juice, not a very good feeling, right? That's not encouraging any of you to go and make cider this year, which is the aim of this class. So a dry apple, it's not necessarily that there's less juice, but the flesh holds on to the juice. So varieties like Somerset Red Streak were favoured over maybe more juicier apples because it held onto the juice, and the quality that you would use in England about that quality is it's woolly. It tastes dry and spongy. It's almost as if it just doesn't have any juice in the first place. It's been dried, but it has not. But actually an attractive quality that was selected, and this apple's been propagated over hundreds of years for that quality, for its ability to be pressed. So dry was one of the sensations. Any others from the rowdy side of the room? Yes. Sorry? A little bit of tannin. Okay. So we got someone who detects tannin. So what would you say was the sensation you had when you tasted the tannin? Was it astringent? Was it bitter?
Bitter, but not in a sharp way.
Bitter, but not in a sharp way. So it's a subtle flavor. Yeah, it's a subtle sensation. Okay, good. Yes.
It's like drinking coffee and you can feel it in the back of your throat.
Oh, okay. Drinking coffee and feeling the back of your throat. Yeah, great description. That's a great description. Okay. Yeah, and
Quick question regarding the tannin
yeah.
tendency. Did the Somerset, did that help with the shelf stability of the cider?
Great question. So, for those who didn't hear it, do the tannins help with the stability of the cider? They do to a certain extent, not as much as the acid. The acid is the most important thing. So, yeah, tannins do have antioxidant qualities, so they can help just deal with the microbial load in the juice and keep things clean. Not nearly as much as the acid. The acid is the most important quality. But great question, thank you for that. Okay, the connoisseurs. So we're going to hear, we're going to hear comparisons to oolong tea, and there's a little bit of musk in this, and connoisseurs. What do you say about the Somerset Red Streak? Sorry? Metallic.
A little bit of bitter.
Sorry?
A little bitter.
A little bitter. Okay. So, well, metallic. That's a very interesting observation. Any other? Yes.
Kind of like the ocean.
Kind of like the ocean. Oh.
Like being at the ocean.
Being at the ocean. Okay. So, wow. I wasn't lying about the connoisseurs, right? Metallic being at the ocean. I'm just getting. Oh, it's sweet. It's sour. On this side of the room. So, okay, well that's interesting. Yeah, it's very, very interesting apple. Okay, the next apple, we're going to go into the bitter sharp category. So this is another English apple. We're visiting a village called Dymock in Gloucestershire. And Dymock, it's a tiny village, doesn't even have a traffic light. You'll drive through it in sort of 10 seconds. But it has the distinction of having two fruits named after the tiny village. Dymock Red, which is the apple, and the Dymock Red pear, which is very confusing. So it has a perry pear and a cider apple from this tiny village in Gloucestershire. So let's see. I haven't waffled on for very long, so maybe who hasn't had the Dymock Red? Lots of people. Okay. So I'll serve us a slack in a little bit. So I'll talk a little bit about the Dymock Red. The Dymock Red may be the oldest apple that you're tasting today. So it's first mentioned in a book called Pomona, which is one of the first English language books about apples and cider making, written in the English language back in the 1640s. So it's likely to predate the 1640s as a variety. It became commonly known at that point to the writers of London. And it's suspected that it has a little bit of French ancestry, which regrettably, as an Englishman, I have to admit most good cider apples from England have. But this is likely the oldest apple that you're tasting today. So this has been propagated by grafting for a good 400 years. So we'll talk about the qualities it has and why you think it's been so successful. So okay, who has not had the Dymock Red? Okay, seems like everyone's had the Dymock Red. Okay, rowdy side of the room. Dymock Red. Bursting with flavour. Oh, okay. That's very interesting. So maybe someone is volunteering to sit on the left side of the room. Bursting with flavour. That is a very florid and descriptive answer. But sharp? Did someone say sharp? It tastes like tea. Oh wow! That is great. So it tastes like tea. A burst of flavours. Connoisseurs, would you agree with that statement? Oh, sage heads nodding in agreement. Yes, we think the rowdy side have got the correct description for the first time in this country.
Only one of us.
Yes.
Deliciously tart.
Deliciously tart. Okay. So the British tradition is very heavy on bitter sharps, and one of the outcomes of being heavy on bitter sharps is there are a lot of what are called single varietal ciders in England, essentially because you have all the qualities in a single apple, right? So you've got lots of sugar, lots of acid, some interesting tannins. So just with one tree and with lots of apples for that variety, you can make a really good cider. You don't have to blend it with other varieties. You don't have to put in lots of SO2 to clean the juice. For an organic cider maker, that's a really nice quality. You're not using any chemicals during the fermentation process. So when you see lots of ciders named after an apple variety, they're typically single varietal ciders. And yes.
When you're doing a single varietal cider,
Yeah.
the populations of yeast on the apple very differently than the mixed varieties.
Really great question. So when you're making a single varietal cider, does the population of the yeast on the surface of the apple have an impact on the process? There's a lot of debate about yeast. So yeast is all around us, right? We've got billions of yeast cells on our skin. It's in the air. It's on apples. So yeast will grow on the surface of apples. There are two sort of contentious theories. One is that yes, those yeasts will be used in the fermentation process, although they'll be the dominant yeasts in your environment. They won't change just based on the surface of the cider apple. The other is that the yeasts are actually building up on your equipment. So if you've got the equipment to make cider, they're actually on the steel, they're on the wood, they're in their environment, and it's less likely that the yeasts on the cider are going to add too much to the fermentation. So two schools of debate on that question. Yes.
Do you find that equipment that's made out of wood is better than like stainless?
I'm a big believer in keeping things clean. So everyone's got a different attitude. The good thing about wood, particularly if you don't have a lot of tannin apples, is that wood, particularly oak, has a lot of tannin in it. So it can be the sacrificial tannin. It can actually add tannin into the juice and add an interesting astringency into the juice. So if you find yourself, you're making apples from the apples that you grow, and they're primarily sweets or sharps, and you don't have a lot of tannin, actually fermenting in oak can actually add some of those qualities to your cider. So great question. Okay, any other comments from the connoisseurs about Somerset Red Streak, and then we'll move on.
Question: how do you spell Dymock?
Dymock, D-Y-M-O-C-K. It's not. It's you won't find it, unfortunately, at FACO. It's very rare in this country. I may be the only grower in the state for Dymock Red. Yes, question at the back. Sorry.
Sour.
Sour. Okay. they got bored of waiting, so they're just going back to sort of general comments. They're just aping the folks on the right of the room at this point. Okay, so Todd.
What else?
What else? Any other qualities? Yes.
I just had a quick question.
Question.
Diamond, is that the city, the town, the person?
That is the tiny little hamlet, the village of 300 people in Gloucestershire, England. Yeah. A lot of apples are named after place names, and that's one of them. The next one we're going to taste is named after a person. We'll go over that. One more question, yeah?
I'm saying flavor of like rhubarb, maybe
Rhubarb.
cranberry somewhere in there.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. It's always the left side of the room. Okay. We are doing Porter's Perfection, so I'm going to pass around a very interesting apple, and please, folks on the right, pass this around to the folks on the left so they can take it. Don't take a bite out of it. This is very interesting.
Todd, can I see the Somerset? Can I see the Somerset?
What?
Can I see the Somerset apple? I struggled too much in that. Spin around. It was a lot.
So the apple that you're going to taste next is called Porter's Perfection. So it is seedling. It was grown in East Lambrook, which is in Somerset County in England. It has a very unique quality, or at least a unique quality for cider apples, in that it can grow fused apples. And you're going to see this. You're going to see an apple with 3 cores, but it's all based. It's got one stalk, and the apples are basically fused together during the growing process. So it shares this quality with one of its. An apple with another cider apple with common ancestry called the Lambrook pippin. So about 10% of apples in your apple trees will be like this Porter's Perfection. So you'll see that if you haven't seen it. It's on the rowdy side of the room. They're gonna be shouting and screaming about it in seconds and how crazy it looks. Okay, so Porter's Perfection.
How crazy does that look?
How crazy does that look? Rowdy side of the room. Yes!
Come on,
Come
Roddy,
on!
give me some.
Yes, looks like something out of a horror movie. Right, exactly. It is a lovely apple though. So Porter's Perfection, named after the breeder. So who has not had a Porter's Perfection yet? Anyone? Everyone's had Porter's Perfection? Okay. So less common than Somerset Red Streak. It was a 20th century apple, early 20th century. So without the I think Somerset Red Streak's a little older, but it's a very nice bitter sharp apple. So again, English tradition, lots of bitter sharps. You will find Porter's Perfection as single varietal for cider makers if they've got enough of it to actually fill the cask. So, thoughts, rowdy side of the room on the Porter's Perfection? Grassy. Chestnut. Okay, you guys have been moving around, right? Pear-like.
Marshmallow.
Okay, we've set the tone. Guys, they've laid out the gauntlet. Marshmallow. You've really got to work hard on this one. You're not going to beat the right side of the room. Marshmallow, very interesting. Was it very similar, very different from the Somerset Red Streak? Oh, sorry, the Diamond Red.
It has similar balance.
Similar balance. Okay, great.
Quite as good.
Not more tannin. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay, great. More tannin. Okay, they've knocked it out of the park. Bless them. I hope you've got your A game with you. Okay, he's going to beat marshmallow as a taste.
Richly tangy.
Richly tangy. That's a good start. Thank you.
Powerful punch, like sour punch from the beginning that burns into like wood and
It's smoothed out.
Sorry.
Come on.
We've got someone saying several tastes and talking about, the nose to the tail. So you guys have got to up your game. Nice, great. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna say like the soap in southern France that like olive oil.
The soap in southern France, like the olive oil. So these guys are working. They're here and they're working at this event. Okay, nice. Thank you. That's a great description. an analogy. This is my favourite apple that you're next going to taste. And this is another English bitter sharp. And it's less about the flavours, although you may tell me otherwise. It's more about the growing habit of this tree. So some trees are called triploids. They have an extra chromosome that gives them a little bit of genetic oomph, and they grow big trees. So the first 3 years I was growing this tree, I thought it was a triploid, because the tree just wanted to fill its space really, really quickly, and then it settled down to bearing, and then it's been really, really quiet. So it's a tree that wants to fill its space. It's a fantastic organic tree. It has lots of vegetable oils in its leaves. The leaves are really glossy, high lipids in its leaves, so that help give it some protection against disease and insects.
What's it called?
Breakwell seedling. So this is a gentleman called George Breakwell, who's a breeder in the 1890s in Wales. So this is Welsh bitter sharp apple from the county of Monmouthshire, along the Severn and Rye valleys.
So it's a Breakwell?
Breakwell's seedling.
Okay.
But I grow 160 varieties. This is my favourite apple to grow. I think Faco had it for a couple of years. I didn't see it in the catalogue this year, but hands down, my favourite apple to grow organically for cider. Okay. Well, after that strong statement, I'm really hoping, Todd, that this doesn't taste awful. People are going to tell me, it's a garbage apple. This is a red delicious.
People like it. Very sensitive.
Okay, who has not had the Breakwell seedling? This young man over there, you haven't had the Breakwell seedling yet? No? Anyone else?